Hello, David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. I'm joined once again. Gosh, you would think that we were doing these all on the same day. We're not.
I've just moved in.
You just moved in. But we're just wearing the same clothes, but that's okay. But we've got Joe Darlington from Being James Bond. Welcome back, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
How you doing?
I am doing great. Doing great.
Got a couple beer bottles in front of us.
That's right.
Almost looks like a fraternity
You would
party.
think.
So we're really doing great.
We're doing great. And you know who's doing great is the gentleman who brought this wonderful libations.
It's what I do.
Kyle, you're back.
I'm back.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back.
Well, thank you for coming. Now, we do have a couple of adult libations. We're adults, so we can do that. But the other reason is because this is going to be a slightly more philosophical conversation. We're not talking about frugal Bond or Bond brands or content creation. We're actually talking about the why. Three letters that sometimes confound us as Bond fans, but why do we gravitate to certain Bond films over others? I mean, opinions is what most of our channels and contributions are all about. So are there certain things about our favorite Bond films that we connect with that maybe some people don't? So let's start with an overarching discussion around it. I mean, Joe, the why. I mean,
This one, of all the things we've been discussing, I feel like this is probably for me the easiest. Because, well, one of the reasons is, as we've mentioned a couple of times, I just did my top 25 ranking, and it was once I was able to sort of visualize and see like what my top tier films are, very easy to sort of pick apart what it is about those films that I kind of gravitate towards. So again, not to jump ahead too quickly, but there are certainly elements in there that only James Bond can do. It is James Bond does provide the perfect cocktail of these elements in the real world setting. I mean, a lot of us, we probably gravitate towards Star Wars and Marvel movies and all kinds of other things. But at the risk of sounding cliche, nobody really does it better than James Bond. There's something that James Bond can do that none of these others can do.
that's true. Kyle, what about you?
Well, Elliot Carver, he kind of said it best. The key to any great story is not who or what or when, but why.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
That's why we're all here.
Brought it back to Brosnan. No less,
That's
too.
true.
Well done.
There is something special about Bond that none of the other film franchises seem to have. And I like all of the Star Wars stuff. I love 80s and 90s action films, Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, Indiana Jones, all of that stuff. But there's something that has made Bond last for 60 years. There's that level of polish, that special feeling of comfort when we watch the movies. There's that other world we step into, the very elegant universe that James Bond inhabits. And I think that's why we keep coming back to it.
I like that. I think for me, the why at a high level, like you guys are keeping it, is also about the escapism factor. Like to your point, Joe, I can watch a Marvel film, I can watch Star Wars, I can get immersed into the moment. With James Bond, I feel like there's nothing else around me. James Bond, the movie that I'm watching, is the surround sound of my life. And that's why it's, I think, become so indelible. And I think it's also a starting point, a jumping point of why the Bond films that connect with me the most connect with me. Because what I will say is, a little bit behind the scenes, I had asked these gentlemen, where should we shoot this video? And we gave Joe the rite of passage. And he said, I don't know, I'm thinking Octopussy's appropriate. Now, I've actually grown to appreciate and love Octopussy more over the years because of Joe and because of my son Ellis, who absolutely love Octopussy. So I've reacquainted myself. I actually think it's a great Cold War film. I'll let you cover this when you cover it. But for me, the reason I connect back to a handful of them more than others is clearly because of the escapism and fun factor. My favorite book, Ian Fleming book, is nobody's favorite Ian Fleming Bond book. It's Dr. No. Everybody loves Moonraker and From Russia with Love and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I love Dr. No because it's got a bonkers giant squid. I love, maybe this is like spending too much time with Calvin Dyson. I love the fun fantasy things that I can't do in the real world. And because of that, and I know we're going to get into this in a big way, when a Bond film serves me up a heaping dose of reality, like Family and Death of Bond, I feel like it's such a bitter pill to swallow, because it's like, no, I just walked away from that moments ago when I was taking a poop.
Yeah. You know, there's something to be said for, you know, escapism is the big word, I think, a lot when we talk about our favorite movies in general, but specifically about James Bond. And I also think that there's a level of escapism, meaning like too much. If I'm watching a film about space aliens and I'm not mocking in any way, shape, or form, but like if I'm watching a movie about superheroes and space aliens and it's just a plethora of CGI,
Yeah.
it's fun, but but also, something also gets lost.
Yeah.
There's also the argument for keeping certain things grounded and finding the perfect balance of both. Like there are, like for example, why is it when we see a stunt that Tom Cruise does that he's doing in real life that we all go, wow? You know what I mean? I mean, there's a reason why that captivates us more than watching a CGI version of the same thing.
Yeah.
So again, that sort of balance of real world, a world I can live in, you know, places I can actually go, doing some things I could actually do, you know, but still transporting me, you know, to another level, if you will. So again, you can still overdo it.
Yeah.
On the escapism.
It's a great point, because I think that if I think about the films that aren't my favorite, we're actually sort of in front of one of them right now. I like Moonraker. I don't love Moonraker, and I think it's because it's a bridge too far. My favorite Bond films, like Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, are the ones that are much more grounded in the real world, but they're far enough from my real world to still be fantastical. But they're also connected to that nice dose of reality.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kyle?
I think it kind of goes beyond Bond a little bit too. If we look at the best Batman movie, The Dark Knight, the plot is the Joker is going to blow up a hospital. It's not somebody's coming from outer space or another dimension. It's a very real, tangible threat. That's why it works. It's the same thing with Bond. Bond movies work best when there's an insane Soviet general, or when there's a media mogul looking for world domination. Those are the things that kind of, they're a little bit far-fetched, but they're only far-fetched in the extent that, you know, it makes good cinema. You could see a plot like that, you know, a crazy Russian general getting his hands on a nuclear weapon. That's why it works. It's real, and it brings us into the story.
But there's a problem with this conversation, because each one of us have different favorite Bond films. So although I think we're on the same path at a high level, when it starts to get down to the nitty gritty, and you think about, and I'm going to use this term, although it's patent pending, so by the time this thing airs, I could get sued by Joe Darlington. But they think about the Bond films that get the most fingerprints, and now that they're on Prime and different things, it's the one, I'm gonna put this very personal. Danielle will say, hey, listen, I'm going to go take a shower. I'm just going to fold the laundry. I got to do this. I got to put on some oils, and then I'll be down. I know that means I've got 35 minutes. 35 minutes to do anything I want with the giant TV that we have. So for 35 minutes, I've got to think about what part of a Bond film am I going to digest. I think my choices are going to be very different than Joe Darlington's. So why do, even though we're all looking for escapism in that just 2 degrees north of real, why do we gravitate to different ones?
That is a great question. You know, I feel that, you know, if somebody said to me that The Godfather is one of the greatest films of all time, I would not be able to really argue that.
Right.
It's also not a film that I'm going to sit around and watch. So you're absolutely right. There's a difference between great films and films that are really rewatchable. Not all of they don't often cross paths. In terms of, I'll bring it back to Octopussy. I think one of the things that I keep going back to, again, there's a lot of different elements. One of them is espionage, and there's a reason why I think espionage is something that we sort of gravitate towards. Again, it's because it's a real life plot. I mean, it's something that it's totally real to life, yet it provides tension and drama, and a kind of mood that's sort of hard to articulate. And Octopussy to me has a lot of that, and sort of taking it back to how much realism is too much or too little. Again, Octopussy has a plot. It's a nuclear bomb that's going to go off, and it makes me kind of go, "Ooh, what's happening? Oh my goodness!" And James Bond really does have to race to beat the clock, to solve this thing. There are some plots, when you compare a film like Casino Royale to something like Moonraker. Kind of an unfair, it's different in many ways.
Yes.
One of the things that jumps out, for example, there's a scene in Casino Royale where Bond is interrogating the guy's wife, to find out what's happening next. And right as she's walking towards the bedroom, he says, "Just for one," click, and he walks out the door.
Right.
Something you really didn't see before. If you took it back to like Moonraker, they're talking a little bit about what they need to know. There's an agent who just grabbed Bond. They're chilling out together, and then he says, "How do you kill 5 hours in Rio if you don't Sambo?"
Right.
Very different, what I mean? Same idea.
Yeah, he's committing.
Right. But it's so the whole mood of the scene is different because Roger Moore has enough time to just do whatever he feels like doing, and then we'll move on.
Which is something wonderful about that.
Yes.
In the Roger Moore era.
Yes.
I get that.
Absolutely right. But it's that intenseness of the moment. Again, what am I in the mood for right now? I'm in the mood for in Casino Royale. I'm in the mood for a story that's intense and it requires my attention and I have to move.
Yes.
So we're talking about a lot of things.
No. But this is good because one of the things I've realized as a latecomer to Octopussy, one of the things I think it does extremely well is what I call stress and relief. So it gives you a lot of stress. It's got a Cold War, it's got intrigue, it's got espionage, and then it's got relief of the fun factor, almost campiness of things. Yeah. So it's that hot and cold. I've equated this with Octopussy. I've really grown to like it because it's like beer and gooey pizza. It's just fun factor for me. Casino Royale is like a gourmet meal. With Casino Royale, I can't multitask. If I'm going to watch Casino Royale, I'm going to sit down, I may get a drink, but I'm not getting up, and I'm not multitasking, and I'm watching a movie from beginning to end. Yeah. It's almost like an important event as opposed to something that just kind of washes over me. Yeah.
It's almost like getting back to my point about The Godfather, but it doesn't mean I want to watch it. I know it's a classic, and I know it's one of the most well-made films in terms of story, etc. But I like you said, it's not pizza. It's not fun. Where you get to the best Bond movies, I think, is when those two things merge.
Yes.
When you can say this is a good movie and it's fun to watch.
Kyle, what about you? I mean, top Bond films. First of all, what is your number one Bond film?
My number one favorite Bond film is probably Majesties.
Okay.
But we're kind of talking about what we would watch in a fun situation. And while I think that's the best film, and I think Casino Royale is also a very good film, there isn't really a piece in that 35 minutes that you just talked about where I only have a little bit of time, so I'm going to carve out a small piece of that movie for a little 35-minute escape.
Right.
If I need that 35-minute escape, it's maybe the first 35 minutes of Die Another Day, which isn't as good of a film, capital F, as Majesties or Casino, but it has a fun 35 minutes in it for that little escape.
And you know what's coming is not going to be fun. So
that's true.
It's almost like, I need to shut it off at 35 minutes quickly.
That's also very, very true.
Yeah.
You can carve out little chunks of it for a little bit of for a little dose of fun, like a piece of candy, as opposed to eating a whole meal.
So all three of us are hitting on something I want to kind of stay on then. We talk about what we gravitate and the why, but it's probably not the same all the time. Mood has to play an important part. For example, I know there are times, much to the chagrin of Joe, that I will be in the mood to watch Quantum of Solace, certain parts of it, just to get kind of that visual sensory type of perception. I also think that there are some Bond films, yes, like Casino Royale, like Quantum, that are very focused on Bond. They are Bond's films. Like you have the other characters, but they're like these satellites that revolve around the sunshine of Bond. Whereas some of the other ones, I feel like if I'm in the mood for something a little bit more frivolous, I'm like, you know something? I want to watch Drax. I want to watch Moonraker.
Right.
I'm going to watch this world domination plot of a volcano. Like, I may be in a whimsical type of mood, but how much does mood factor into it, Hal?
Mood is such a huge piece of it, because if you're going to watch a Bond movie and sit down and focus, like you just said, you're going to pick a movie like Casino Royale. Casino Royale needs focus. Sometimes you just want to put on a nice casual Sunday morning Bond movie. Ooh. You've been out late and maybe
hangover movie?
Yeah, maybe feeling a little worse from where on a Sunday morning, and you just want to relax. That's the time to watch Goldfinger. That's the time to watch Octopussy, A View to a Kill, to kind of just settle down and have a fun time.
I thought that A View to a Kill would be a good film to watch if you were leaving the earth. No, that's awful. That's unfair.
I'm sorry to speak ill.
How dare
swear
you.
in front of you.
Send all evil 10 letters.
I think what we're kind of hitting on, honestly, Bond is also extremely unique in the fact that, like you said, it sort of covers all grounds. It covers all of your moods. It's like if you were walking around the grocery store and you could just you can get any food you're in the mood for. The Bond films are just like that.
Right.
Again,
Yes.
Some days I'm in the mood for wine and cheese. Some days I'm in the mood for cake and ice cream.
Right.
And anything in between, Bond pretty much covers it. So, and I would say even the worst Bond movie has a whole bunch of those different things.
Right.
Like no matter what your mood is, I think there's some days where I would love to just sort of put together like a montage of all the pre-title sequences and just watch that for a half an hour. You know what I mean? It is a testament to the fact that it really is almost all things to all people.
I think there were 20 Bond, at least in my opinion, there are 20 Bond films that are almost like medications for different ailments. Like you said, for different moods. So if I'm really feeling this way, I may take this one. I think there are 5 that are what I call outliers or anomalies. Like the Diamonds Are Forevers of the world, where I have actually said, and I will do it, I'm going to watch Diamonds Are Forever over this break that I have during the holidays because I haven't seen it in a while, and I just want to like encounter it. Like I want to stumble upon it.
Yeah.
But it's not something where I'm going to be like, hey, I'm feeling jaunty and kind of mid-century modern tonight. I think I'm going to watch Diamonds Are Forever. There are these strange, A View to a Kill, License to Kill, Diamonds Are Forever. There are these weird No Time to Die anomaly movies that I will always still put on. I would never want to dismiss any of them. But I don't do it for a particular mood or reason. It's almost to visit a strange uncle. That I'm almost like curiously poking at.
Yes.
Like, is this for real? And I think everybody has those strange anomaly ones.
Yes. Well, that's the thing too. I always say that sometimes the Bond films they're kind of like wine, where people will say like, you choose a wine, you usually choose a wine to complement your dish. But other times you pick one that contrasts a little bit. You know what I mean? A sweet to offset the salty, etc. And I think Bond does that sometimes. Like sometimes I'm really in the mood for this one, but like you said, I want to rediscover one I haven't seen in a while. I want it to sort of take me by surprise, and just sort of be surprised by what it is.
The metaphor I like, while we're throwing them all out, is there's 25 flavors of ice cream. And
Baskin Robbins.
Sometimes you like chocolate, and sometimes you want to go a little more avant-garde and get, the rainbow sherbet or the Rocky Road or whatever it is. And then come back to the chocolate when you just want that old, standard, reliable Goldfinger.
Is it Vito Kill the rainbow sherbet?
Yeah, sure.
Just want to put it out there.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me ask you guys a question. And again, just because I just had the experience of doing my top 25 and really focusing on like what was it about my top 10 that's what was the characteristic?
Yeah.
When you guys look at your top 10, if there was one characteristic you had to sort of say encapsulates this bunch, what would that be?
for me, it's easy. It's a combination of heroic and badass Bond. I need Bond to be this suave, cooler than school, badass, heroic individual, where it's impossible odds, where everybody around him is saying it's going to fail, where the worst bad guys in the world are after him, and yet he survives. So I say this, and I know a lot of people say it about Maverick.
Or does he?
The air punch, just the air punch coming out of that.
Yeah.
Those are my top 10, where it kind of fits all of that.
Yeah.
And the foil has to be really good. Like the bad guy has to be so strong that, it just feels important. It feels bad. Those are mine.
Okay.
It's something totally intangible, but just fun. My top 10 are the films that I'm going to put on when I want to have a good time, when I want to escape into the world. And I like to put myself in the world of James Bond when I watch that movie. Is this a James Bond that I want to emulate? Are these places that I would like to travel? Are these people I would like to encounter? Those are the ones that I enjoy the most.
Nice. I would say for me, it's probably the films that, for the most part, play it straight. That they're not winking at the camera.
Yes.
And I don't have a problem when they do. Like there's a lot of franchises I could look at, but like something like Thor Ragnarok to me was the perfect level of winking at the camera.
Yeah.
And we're having fun with this,
But
don't
then
take
the
it too
next Thor
seriously.
was awful.
The next one just went off the rails with that.
Yeah.
And it just lost any sense of, again, you can't. It's like walking around a room with a blindfold on, and you can't feel anything until you find a wall. Like once you find a wall, you can say, okay, now I know where I am.
Right.
And I feel like that's sort of maybe a better way of sort of explaining the groundedness that I think some of these films need.
Yeah.
And when they lose that, and they're just all over the place, it's hard to feel anything.
Yeah, and I like what Kyle's saying too about this. I mean, you're all saying some great things, but anytime, and listen, we got to call a spade for a second, because anybody that's watching right now who watches Bond for sheer entertainment, good on you. I don't think we do that. I think fans and fanatics are at a different level where you become connected to the character. It's almost like virtual reality, where you become behind the eyes of Bond in the best, most immersive moments. So in my top 10, I have Brosnan films,
So do I.
Right. So, I mean, Tomorrow Never Dies is in my top 10, which usually doesn't make a lot of people's top 10, because I feel like I'm behind that individual that I would love to be, saying all the right things, betting the right people, driving the best cars, having all the great lines, saving the day, being successful, all these things. Freaking Pierce Brosnan. Like, all the tropes are there. It's like check, check, check.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, here's a reality we don't talk about on these channels, because very often they're very superficial, the conversations. And that's me saying that about my channel. But I will say this. This is a time and place in 2023, when this thing is airing, when some people in our society are feeling tempered down a little bit. And I'm not going to get political or anything like that, but they're feeling like, okay, I've got to be careful, I've got to watch out, I can't be the real version or the best version of who I am, etc. What I think Bond does, it sets an emulation megaphone of like, you know what, unrestricted, back in that scenario, etc. That would be fun. It could never happen, because I want to be, gainfully married and things like that. And I'm not a murderous individual. But something, given that situation, wouldn't it be fun to always save the day in that situation?
Yeah.
That's, to me, the ultimate.
Yeah. And I would sort of say the immersiveness of Bond, I think, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I feel like when I say that I like them when they play it straight, that to me is almost another way to say that.
Yeah.
Because again, if they get too off the rails, like there are moments.
Can you name one that goes off the rails that takes you out of the moment?
I think maybe the scene that I mentioned before with Bond and Manuela. Mm-hmm. Not terrible. I'm not trying to pick on it too much, but again, that is sort of a moment where it's almost like Bond walks into a room. There's a beautiful woman in it. You know that there's no way this woman is not going to end up with their clothes on the floor.
Because I don't mean to be like this, but that Kyle calls that Tuesday.
I know, right?
I'm
Exactly.
the single guy here. So.
Kyle's like,
The line starts here, ladies.
Kyle's like,
The
you
line
mean to
starts
say,
here.
that doesn't happen all year? But and again,
Butcher tickets.
it's not that it can't happen, and it's not that it's unusual for James Bond, but it's just a matter of how it's played.
Yeah.
It's played where, like, I mean, one of the things I love about Casino Royale is that Bond, in whether it was with Solange or with Vesper, there was a playful back and forth that had to happen to make that happen.
Yes.
To me, that sort of feels more like real life.
Yeah.
And in both situations, I mean, there are, things are going to happen. But again, you watched it sort of be built. You watched this thing happen the way in real life it happens, so it works. But watching, it was almost like there was a moment in like Roger Moore era where I felt like if this guy walked into a room and threw a pen in the air, it would just land in his pocket. Like he doesn't have to do anything to make things happen. You know what I mean? He was just so ridiculously perfect and good at everything. Which is fine. It is fun, but it's more fun, I think, if you can see the wheels turning a little bit, the gears working.
How many Roger Moores are in your top 10?
In my 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you do have some.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
But again, you can, the early Roger Moores versus the later Roger Moores. I mean, the two that are in my top 10 are For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy. Significantly different than some of the earlier ones.
Yes. And all about espionage and intrigue.
Big time.
Yeah.
Well, I see what you're saying. It's kind of coming down to, do we envision ourselves in this situation? Could we see the situation unfolding in our lives? Or is it wish fulfillment? And I think some of the Roger Moore films, some of the more lighthearted Bond films or lighthearted moments are kind of fantasy. That if we found the genie lamp, we would wish for the way Roger Moore behaves with Manuela, for example, just using that. It's more of a fantastical, dare I say, juvenile notion of what being an adult in this line of work is versus what espionage really is,
Right.
where Bond uses women as a means to an end in order to fulfill his objectives.
And
both work. It just depends on the tone of the film.
And by the way, I mean, lest we get too far away, because I think we've been appropriately filtered through the Daniel Craig era, and I'll use that term correctly in this case, of if you go back to Casino Royale and even Quantum of Solace, Bond still does those Roger Moore things. He's still connecting and betting women to either have pure fun or to connect with them for information. It's not until Skyfall and certainly Spectre, and then they just amp it to the nines with No Time to Die, that we start to get into this whole hemisphere of like, no, that Roger Moore thing with Manuel, pulling the robe open, But I would actually fence with you. I think Timothy Dalton actually took one of the biggest pauses from it. I don't think he was as frivolous with people. Maybe at the very beginning of Living Daylights, when he lands on the ship and he goes, I'll be there in 2 hours.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think you've got some really strong moments with Brosnan and with Craig doing very Moore-like things, which is why I think we love the consistency. And dare I say, the different actors we're naming are in the top 10. Now, I will ask you, Kyle, are any of the Timothy Daltons in your top 10?
Yes. Living Daylights, I rank very, very highly, probably in my top
Get
5.
Really? The top 5?
Yeah, I'm a huge,
It's in my top 5 too.
huge fan of Living
It's in your
Daylights.
top 5?
Oh, yeah.
So tell me why. Like, why does that one get fingerprints?
Well, you touched on something. You mentioned for example, the romance in The Living Daylights. That sort of goes into what I was talking about, where again I see the byplay starting to happen, where they first meet. They're in this sort of
It grows.
mess together, right? And you see him sort of romancing her a bit. So again, when the romance is starting to blossom, I'm buying it because it makes sense. In fact, I'll even take it a step further and say, in terms of just the elements I like in my Bond movies, and it's going to sound weird, but romance is a big one. And I big time find that the ones that I gravitate towards the most, Octopussy, Living Daylights, Casino Royale, On Her Majesty's, have real romances in them. And again, I know I might lose my guy card, and I you know,
He's
I'm
a
not,
newlywed.
I'm not, yeah, well,
Safe
you know,
zone.
I'm not trying to say that I like watching the Hallmark Channel either, but I kind of feel like, you know, when I'm watching these romances happen, it really does work, and I can feel it. You know, there's a thing, again, walking in Bond's footsteps, boy, again, watching the gears work a little bit really lets me kind of live through him a bit, and I kind of love it.
And Living Daylights does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, not the banner romance of the year, but certainly a real romance that you're watching it blossom.
I believe it too.
Living Daylights.
I love The Living Daylights for a lot of reasons. It's steeped in Fleming. I could see Fleming watching this movie and saying, okay, they've treated my character and my material with respect. I love that it's a really tight Cold War thriller, a lot of action, but the tone is balanced. So we've got a lot of action, we have some dark moments, we have a lot of romance, and the humor lands. It's not over the top. There are no clown suits, there are no gorilla suits, but there are some witty one-liners. I just find that it's balanced, it's exciting, the action lands, I buy into the romance. I want to be James Bond in The Living Daylights.
I've got to give it another try. I've revisited Dalton in a lot of different ways and a lot of different discussions, and it has improved, but not enough to be in the top 5. But it's interesting, like when I hear things like, oh my gosh, this is in this person's top 5, it does make me want to re-explore it a little bit.
I think that one is definitely worth re-exploring. I think that the third act does peter out a little bit.
I think you could say that about quite a few.
Exactly.
Bond
Yes, very
movies.
true. Yeah, but I think the first 2/3 are just wildly spectacular.
Why does it seem like nowadays, especially for some reason, the old traditional ones, and I mean the Connery ones, the ones that everybody from Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, the big hits, why do they seem to have fallen down a little by the wayside with some people as far as fingerprints are concerned? Are they too hollowed ground? Are they too biblical?
I don't know. They haven't fallen down as far as I'm concerned. I'll watch From Russia with Love right now. I'll watch the first 4 Connerys, probably 4 of the ones I watched the most.
They are.
Yeah.
They're the ones you gravitate.
You know what I think? I think it is. It's not that they've fallen in any way. It's just the opposite. And I feel like the fact, particularly the first 4, for me especially, because they're so just above reproach.
Yeah.
They don't garner a lot of commentary.
That's what I mean. They're like
I mean, there's nothing to really pick apart, and those to me are just the go-to. That's it. They those work, and there's the other ones. Well, I like this, but they should have done more of that.
Right.
And I mean, we can pick apart a lot of them.
I think if anybody listed one of the first 4 Connerys as their favorite Bond film, we would all say, okay.
No one would blink.
Nobody
sense.
would ever question that.
Makes sense, but I think one of the things that Joe's talked about in the past is even though something's your favorite, like let me take for me, Casino Royale is my favorite. It's my favorite film. I think it's your favorite.
Solid choice.
All right. So I know that is not the Bond film that I put on the most. And in many cases, I won't walk over to a Goldfinger I can't tell you how long it's been since I've seen From Russia with Love, and it's probably my 3rd favorite movie. And so for some reason, I'm not putting fingerprints back on those favorite films. And I'm trying to explore why.
Some of the films, a lot of the ones that do get a lot of replay at my house are the ones that are the best looking. So I do tend to fall back on Skyfall is a big one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A few of the Brosnans because the action scenes are just
Which
so much
ones?
Fun. The World Is Not Enough. I mean, I can watch the opening boat chase just anytime. The music
I'm finding
is
so many more
adore
people.
that movie.
Right?
Yeah.
World Is Not Enough is like just right there.
yeah. Some of the it's almost like on your coffee table. If you're gonna put a couple magazines out, which one's gonna be sitting at the top of the pile? Well, it's the best looking cover probably. So there are a couple of the Bond movies that again they get a lot of replay simply because they're nice looking, the music is really good, and again that is sort of a separate thing from the story. I mean, if the story's the trick sometimes is that the story is so good, but once it's like reading a book. I could read it over and over. The books you reread are the ones where the language is just delicious. You know, it's such a good read. You know that you don't mind reading it a couple times.
Right.
A mystery, for example, though, probably not so much, because once you've solved the mystery, thank you, it's done, and I'll find another one now. Like there's some that you can only rediscover so many times.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was going to say. I think maybe one of the reasons why, even though you love it, you haven't watched From Russia with Love as often, because you don't have anything to analyze in it. You know it's great.
Yeah.
So you're not
Beyond
going
reproach.
you're not going to nitpick anything, and you're not going to say, maybe I've misjudged this, there's something that I've missed, or
That's a great point,
there's something new that I need to discover that other people see that I don't. You already know you love it.
That's a great point, because recently, very recently, because of a conversation I had with Calvin Dyson, we talked about On Her Majesty's Secret Service, so I rewatched it again from beginning to end. But it was a full analysis. It was like I'm taking in the characters, which is a different level of enjoyment than just letting something wash over you. The other thing is, besides analyzing versus watching and experiencing a movie is very different.
Yes.
I'll say that very rarely, please don't cry for me or do the tiniest violin, but very rarely will I have time or inclination to watch from beginning to end a Bond film, because there's just so much going on. So I consume Bond in the last couple years in bite-sized snackable moments. So now I'm probably also going through of which ones are my most snackable scenes. Like Die Another Day, I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
First 35 minutes, give it to me, macaroni and cheese all day long.
Yep.
But, you know, there are other ones that I need to kind of connect back to as well. And I'll tell you what, Joe, For Your Eyes Only has become a grower, not a shower for me as well. It is kind of like one of these ones that someone said to me the other day, this is a perfect example. Someone said, a project manager that works for me, rediscovered the Bond films, went through all the Craig ones, loved them. I said, you know what, you should definitely watch the Brosnan ones. It's not too far of a departure from Craig. But I said, at some point when you're ready to graduate, let me know, and I'm going to introduce you to the first Roger Moore film. And she's like, oh, Roger Moore, that'd be great. What would you recommend? And you know what I said, based on the fact that she was coming from like the Craig thought process? I said, For Your Eyes Only.
I would totally agree with that.
I agree with that.
Because of sometimes it's going back to mood, it's what is your jumping point that you're coming from. If I'm watching something very serious, I'm not going to jump to Moonraker or View to Kill. It's too silly.
Yeah.
So you got to look at those leaps and bounds.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you're probably sitting there like almost going, at some point they're gonna find Moonraker.
Do it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, I think For Your Eyes Only. The two things come to mind as you're talking about that. You know, again, For Your Eyes Only. I think I don't think some of the scene with him and meeting Columbo. The scene prior to that, where there was a big shootout. After that, excuse me, where they arrive by sailboat. And they bust up.
I love that part.
Yes,
I mean, that is great stuff. I mean, it's just so. It is good. It's moody. I mean, the mood of the. And another thing that also offers is the travelogue aspect when they're just walking around Greece.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, honestly, one of the films that I used to go to a lot just to pop in and watch, believe it or not, was Dr. No.
Me too.
And I used to say to myself, I
film.
used to ask myself, why? And I said, well, because it's the time that it's set in. I feel like I'm transported back to this era. They spent 20 minutes in the airport because that was like a big deal back then.
Yes.
So I mean, like this. So just the idea of traveling to a foreign place, and again, it's there's probably a lot of movies that take place in different places, but it's the lens that you sort of like the aura that people had back then. The idea that traveling is a really big deal.
Kyle, I'll throw this out to you because I think we've actually talked about this. I think sometimes our fingerprints or our why behind a film is sometimes the type of transportation, not just escapism and transportation, but if you want a vacation Bond movie, you know the ones to go to.
Absolutely. There are certain Bond films like Dr. No, I love Dr. No, like Thunderball, even You Only Live Twice, where you are transported to another country, another culture. You're seeing these beautiful visuals that you would miss in other action films.
And the older Bonds did it best.
Absolutely. You're not seeing these, although I will say Skyfall and No Time to Die do a really good job of providing those beautiful vistas.
True.
I don't necessarily believe they're vacation Bond movies the way that Thunderball and Dr. No are.
They're not a good vacation ending.
No, no.
No Time to Die.
Or Skyfall, for that matter.
That's true.
But
Although it's a similar ending to National Lampoon's Vacation, where the grandmother dies at the end, in the car. But similar. Some vacations I like
no
that.
dogs were harmed.
No Time to Die. I'm going to mark you down as undecided.
Exactly. So you're saying there's a chance that you'll like it.
But those vacation movies are fun because, again, you're just transported to this beautiful world with these scenic vistas and beautiful women and fast cars and good food and drink. It's fun.
I have a question. This is one of the tougher ones in this conversation. So now we're going to be flexing our muscles. We're a couple of Presidentes in. I think we're ready. And Joe, I'm going to hit you on this first because it is a little bit around No Time to Die. Is the why behind why we like a particular film, like we know that you like No Time to Die, because sometimes it feels a logical progression from other films that you've seen. In other words, sitting alone, it may not exist as, oh, I really enjoy this. But if you look at the progression, because you've always talked about No Time to Die as, it seems like a great crescendo to this Daniel Craig arc of events.
Yeah.
How much does that factor into your likability of a film?
Well,
The other films.
yeah. Honestly, I kind of feel like No Time to Die is probably one of the only cases where that would even be true, though. Like, I can't think of another example where I like a particular film or don't like. Well, actually, maybe that's not true.
Oh, I've got a couple.
I probably License to Kill and Quantum of Solace probably
Correct.
get a little extra ire from me because they did come off of a film prior that I really, really connected with.
Right.
And they seem like we've said the sophomore effort, but but again, it's almost like Steven Spielberg used to talk about when he would write himself into a corner, and he would say basically you'd write the character into a situation that he couldn't get out of, and he'd say it was like painting yourself into a corner, and he would say sometimes the only way to get out of that is to run so quickly through the wet paint that you hope no one's going to see your footprints. And I feel like in both of those cases, that's kind of what they're doing, where they're not really sure what to do now, so they just sort of go for it. They keep the pace high, fast, don't look too quickly, or else you'll notice that some of the plot isn't really working, etc. So maybe in that case, yeah. No Time to Die. Am I giving it a pass because of because it had painted itself into a corner? And I think maybe yeah, because again, the build up to that film was so palpable, and it gave us a lot of time to look at the Craig era and see where they were. So it was sort of like, let's see how they're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can say with No Time to Die that they did that, where they ran through the wet paint. They kind of did just sort of stop and say, okay, where are we now?
Right.
What are we going to do? And how are we going to move this forward and come to a conclusion? So I think I am willing to concede that maybe I'm giving it passes a little bit in that respect.
And the only reason I thought about that is because I think about the baggage of Bond, as I'm going to call it. Going into On Her Majesty's Secret Service, if I didn't have the positive baggage of what Sean Connery had built from the other movies, I don't think I would like it as much. I think that, well, let me explain why, for me at least, my opinion, is that George Lazenby is a neutral, vanilla, almost translucent Bond. So you see the rest of the movie. So if I didn't have the other baggage of how strong Bond was as a character, to me, that film wouldn't have shined so much, because I'd be like, the main character is actually potentially the weakest point. Quantum of Solace, the same thing. If Quantum of Solace was the first Craig film, and I didn't have the positive baggage of Casino Royale, I'd have a disconnect. Same with The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah.
If I didn't have Live and Let Die to connect to Man with the Golden Gun, it might be a less film.
I feel like I'm going to jump in and cut you off.
No, please.
One of the things they've always said about James Bond is that after the first one, you basically it was like writing economy. You could save yourself a lot of time because you don't have to continually reintroduce the character. You already know who he is, so you can just walk in M's office. Here's your mission. Go, and you're saving yourself an awful lot of time, and you can use that time for other things.
Yeah.
So I think you could sort of say that about a lot of the Bond films, really. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I feel like if we had never seen Bond before, and it was simply a movie based on a novel, I think it would be pretty spectacular. But yes, you would have to spend a lot more time introducing this character.
Right.
So, and I don't know how that would affect the overall film.
Yeah.
If you had to do that.
Yeah. Good point.
It does expect you to know who James Bond is, what his
Yes.
relationships to M and Q and Moneypenny are. But I would definitely agree with you that George doesn't really do anything adventurous with the character, anything that's unique or different or risky that some of the other actors would do. That was probably a conscious decision, just knowing his limitations as an actor and taking into consideration the time. He was replacing Sean Connery, the original, the man who set the tone. Of course he was going to pale in comparison to that.
But you also have to think, too, I mean, one of the things I always walk away with about On Her Majesty's is I don't know if it would have worked had Connery done it.
I don't think it would.
Oh, no,
Because you
I don't
needed
think it
a
would
fresh-
either.
I don't think it would.
All
Right.
three of us are in agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, you needed a fresh face. I don't think
Yes.
you would have bought the idea that Bond would have fallen in love had it been
Absolutely
Connery.
I literally just had this conversation with Calvin Dyson where, because he asked, he goes, you think it would have been great? And I said, no. I think, because again, it's like, when Kissy dies and, you only live twice. And he's like, next.
Poison.
Next.
If
next.
they followed up Thunderball with On Her Majesty's, that maybe. But once
Yes.
they had already done You Only Live Twice, I don't think they could have circled back and tried to make Connery more...
Right.
If we want to get really crazy, I would almost say there's a point of divergence after Thunderball, and there's two timelines. One that goes to You Only Live Twice, one that goes to Majesty's. I think both of those films follow Thunderball. There's no way you can logically make
That makes perfect sense.
Majesty's
Yeah, that's an
follow You
interesting
Only
point,
Live
yeah.
Twice.
I actually think Brosnan could have, now we're playing fantasy
I
games.
totally
I think
agree.
Brosnan could have very well played On Her Majesty's Secret
I was going to
Service.
say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I think if you put
He could do Death
if you
of
put
Love
Brosnan
very well.
or Dalton into that movie, I think it would absolutely work. I don't think it would work with Connery or Roger Moore.
I will say this, though, as hard-nosed and badass as we say Craig is from the very first movie, when Vesper dies, he falls apart.
Yeah.
And that's very Fleming.
Yeah.
Because in the book, everybody thinks like, oh, the book Fleming is the manly man, slap
Right,
on the
right,
ass,
yeah.
dink, go man talk. No.
Yeah.
Like he's ruined in the
Right.
very first book
Yeah.
by Vesper.
It's really the Connery Bond that kind of created that mystique of Bond being the manly man with no emotions. He just
Schlap. Just,
right
good
moves
slap.
moves
Yeah.
from
Yes.
slapping on his smart mouth. Just bounces from one bed to the next.
Yeah.
That was the Connery Bond more so than it was,
That was
the
definitely
Fleming
the
Bond.
Connery Bond. Sometimes they don't let it go.
The
Yeah.
Fleming Bond had a lot more emotional depth.
Kyle, hold it together. That's all I ask. We can't edit these things. We don't have the money for it.
I'm gonna get killed.
2023, they've cut back on our budget for the Bond experience like you wouldn't believe. This is why we got to do like 9 videos in one day and serve cheap beer from the Caribbean.
We're
That was free.
churning them out.
Yeah. By the way, this beer was free.
That's true.
That's the
Free for you.
guys. All right. We've connected a lot with the philosophical aspects of why. I've got the most devilish question, and it's literally a devilish question, because although we have our favorite number one films, we've all kind of ranked where we've gone. Imagine, if you will, that horrible cloven hoof devil himself came out. He goes, "Christmas is over. I'm going to set you in an island, and you can only have one Bond film to put your fingerprints on. Tell me what that Bond film would be." And it might not be your number one pick, don't forget.
Right.
Because maybe you want to escape, maybe you want to go to different locations. All the whys that we just talked about have to feed up into this one decision. Which Bond film because of what we just talked about, are you choosing?
Who's going first?
Would you like to go first?
Sure.
You think you have it on your mind.
I think it's because I'm looking right at it. I've got it here and I've got it there.
Oh.
I'm going with Tomorrow Never Dies. Wow. I love
Where does this fall in your ranking, by the way?
pretty high. It's
Top 5?
I don't know if it's top 5, but it's definitely top 10. I have a nostalgic affinity for this one because it was the first one I saw in the theaters, and you never forget your first. But I love Bond in it. I like the locations. I like the women. I like the action. I love the music. It's probably 2 or 3 top scores for me. So that definitely factors into it too. It's just one of those movies that I can pop in and have a good time every time, no matter what kind of mood I'm in, whether I want to sit and focus or if I want to just put it on in the background while I'm paying bills.
That's a great one. I love that. Joseph.
Ouch, boy, that's rough.
Didn't see it coming.
Let's hope this never happens.
I didn't see it coming.
Right? I feel like I want to say, like, can I just make a 2-hour clip show? No?
Go back to your PTS.
Yeah, totally right.
Best version.
That'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
Only one.
That would be a tough one. I would probably, if it happened today, man. I'm so tempted to really be a contrarian and say No Time to Die.
Do it.
And really have people just go bonkers and go,
No, but that's
You know why? It's
that's
'cause
actually smart.
It's the longest one, so that you have a
it's
lot of
good value
material
for your
there.
money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the longest one. It's the newest one.
And it's a faster death than swallowing seawater.
It's the one you've seen the most, or the least, rather.
The one I think I will say, I mean, seriously, I'm kind of being half funny, half serious though, because I think the one I probably would have said automatically was Skyfall, and it's really because I love the different. I mean, again, I've said this over and over.
Choice.
I'm a sucker for a really good looking film. Skyfall has a bunch of different locations, different visuals. The music is good. It is kind of an exciting watch, and again, I love just the different looks of the different scenes. So I might have fallen on it for that, and then I kind of said, No Time to Die. It is a really good looking film. I haven't, and I know it's probably kind of a silly point that it's so new, but it is the one I've seen the least. So if I had to watch something over and over, at least I'm watching something I haven't already seen hundreds of times. It's good looking. It's long. It could even be that, to tell you the truth.
Dude,
but my reasoning
this
is
will make
kinda,
history. This video, so please.
But it's almost like, but that's strictly kind of talking in terms of, like you said,
Time.
fingerprints and just watchability.
Because you're there for eternity. So after a time, No Time to Die is going to not be the new girlfriend.
Well, that's
It's going to
exactly
be
right.
the old
That's exactly
hag in the
right. That's
corner.
1,000% correct.
Yeah.
Right. So I should go with something a little more tried and true. But again, it goes back to what I said in the beginning about just because the story is the best or it's the best made film doesn't mean it's necessarily the one you keep just grabbing and
So
throwing on when you
what's
got
your
5
choice?
minutes.
I feel like it's No Time to Die. I think we're making history.
Don't know. Maybe so I don't cause a complete revolt. I'll just say Skyfall.
Well, I know, but I mean, if you feel No Time to Die.
my subscriber base will just like cut in half.
Oh, it's done already. You're kidding? It's done with Timothy. No, that's all right. Skyfall.
I'll say Skyfall.
That's a good solid choice. I am so immediately when I thought about this question, I thought I've got to go Connery. I have to. If I'm going to watch something for eternity, I think of Bond. I think Connery. So now I have to whittle it down to which Connery. Now you could say Dr. No or Thunderball, which are some of my favorites, and they're certainly in my top ranking. What I'm actually going to go with, and maybe I'm going to surprise all of you like you've surprised me, I'm actually going to go with one that I don't typically choose, which is Goldfinger.
Really?
Because it is this known, comfortable thing. I know every turn of the corner, like the lines of a DB5. It has all of the tropes, from the music to the direction to the gadgets to how Connery acts. I mean, he is at the pinnacle, like Tomorrow Never Dies, of like Bond. He is there. He is comfortable. It's got the style aspects. It's got a great bad guy. It's got a great henchman. So I mean, to me, it's like if I need to have the most complete kind of historic film, like, you know, aliens could come over to me, or since we're in hell, other little demons can come over to me and go, "What you watching?" And I'll be like, "Dude, you haven't seen this? It's Goldfinger." They're like, "Screw you! I'm a demon. I eat brimstone." We're going off the rails, but I mean, these are real. I am shocked about all our choices.
Goldfinger has everything, and I think that's one of the movies. If you were to introduce somebody who's never seen a James Bond movie, Goldfinger is one of the ones that I think is a great introduction to what James Bond is all about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
agreed.
But it's a hard
Agreed.
choice though, because when you put it that way, where you have to pluck one from the rest of the 25, you are sort of saying, I want you to pick one aspect of one
It's
one
like
aspect of
Jenga.
James Bond, right?
Yeah.
It is.
It all comes falling down.
Yes, it's like the little game where you're trying to make the little hook.
Yeah,
Pull
which
something
is
up
why
and
I
drop
chose
it.
Goldfinger,
Uh-huh.
and I like actually Tomorrow Never Dies too, because to me Tomorrow Never Dies is Brosnan's sense of like it's got everything.
Yep.
Like even better than Goldeneye, which some people think is a superior movie. To me, Tomorrow Never Dies has all the checkpoints.
Yeah.
It's like House Hunters. You know, it's
Yeah,
got the
yeah.
fireplace, it's got
Right,
the
yeah,
balcony,
yeah.
it's got the big kitchen. It's like city center. I'm going for that.
Yeah.
So at this point, what I would love everybody to do, now that we pulled apart our psyche, put it back together like gum, I'd like you in the comments to post what your go-to film might be, that perfect film. It could be your number one ranking, or like us, the one that we just think it gravitates back to our why. So are we a little bit more, I don't know, knowledgeable about why we gravitate to one or the other?
Marginally.
I think so.
I think so. That's a definite sort of.
It's one of those things. It's so eye-opening that it creates more questions.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's put me in the mood to go home and watch Skyfall and Goldfinger. I'll say that.
Or to change up to a stronger drink. One or the other. We'll have to see.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Gentlemen, Joe, Kyle, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Always a good time.
Amazing time. And this has been David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. We'll see you all real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.